All right, all right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. This is a post game of the 49ers week 5 and a another loss for the 49ers. This one they dropped 24 to 23 to the lowly Arizona Cardinals. And this is a frustrating loss. Story of this one was injuries and just once again a lack of concentration down the stretch. I'll start with getting into some of those injuries that really messed with us. The big one in this game actually was our kicker, Jake Moody. Went out with the ankle injury, and it completely shifts the way you view, the remaining 30 yards of the field when you don't have a kicker that you can rely on to put three on the board. And so, that ended up being a lot of the story down the stretch was Kyle had to make some play calls that he may not have otherwise made, knowing that, I'm not going to settle for three here. So that was a tough beat for the Niners. I think that losing your kicker and not having anybody as a backup to, at least that you can trust, it's a big hit. Hufanga went out with a wrist injury. So, he came last year, he had his ACL injury, makes an awesome comeback, and has an ankle injury, puts him out last week. And then this week, it's a wrist injury. What's next? That's frustrating. We can't get Hoof back on the field for more than a week at a time. But, story of the 49ers, right? Juwan Jennings went down in the second play of the game with a hand injury. However, he did finish out the game. We'll see what that looks like. I don't know if it's probably going to show up on an injury report. Early thoughts in this game. I thought the 49ers were playing pretty well. Brandon Ayuk had arrived finally. It took 5 weeks for him to get here. I thought it would take 4 to 5, and I said that. But here we are, week 5, and through a quarter and a half of play, he had 108 yards. So it was good to see a Brandon Ayuk sighting. It took him long enough to get here, but to be able to rely on him to make some big plays early on in this game and make some big catches, it was nice to see. I was concerned with the amount of times we were not running the football early on. I think that Kyle is in his head right now, if I had to guess. When you don't have Christian McCaffrey, it's a hit, right? But Jordan Mason has proved that he can take a lot of this workload. And he's, through his first 5 games, Jordan Mason has the most yards by any 49er running back in Niner history. And so you can lean on him a lot more than I saw him leaning on him in this game. And especially early on. Jordan finished with 14 carries in this game for 89 yards. And that's almost half of what he's been doing for this team through the first 4 games to start the year. So it's interesting to see, especially against the defense and the Cardinals, who are terrible against the run. I mean, they're terrible against everything, sure. But against the run in particular, why aren't we running the ball a little bit more? Especially if a lot of what Kyle's offense is playing that mind game, getting the run game going, and then, forcing the defense to have to, commit to a run. And then you catch them off guard with play actions, and all of a sudden you've got wide receivers going for 175 yards. So that was a little bit concerning. And I think that one of my biggest takeaways of the season so far is just that Kyle I think he's just ultimately in his head. I think he's overthinking things. And it's a lot to do with Christian McCaffrey not being there. I mean, that's his golden boy. Christian McCaffrey was designed for Kyle Shanahan's system. And I mean, same with Debo, right? But when you have one of those guys out, it's a big hit for him. And I think he gets a little complacent when having those guys, on the field. He relies on them more than, I wouldn't say more than he should, but he relies on them a lot. And so when one of them is out, he feels like he has to compensate in other areas when it's, you've got Jordan Mason, who he doesn't fill it perfectly, but he fills the role. So I'm wondering when we're going to lean on him and see maybe the same trust that's placed in Christian McCaffrey. And we may not. We'll see. I will tell you, not having Christian McCaffrey, it shows in the red zone. the Niners right now, I don't have the stats pulled up. I don't have their ranking pulled up. I'll probably have that on Thursday when Marcos and I record. But we are probably one of the worst red zone offenses in the league right now in terms of percentages getting that thing in the end zone. I saw multiple times today the 49ers between the 20 and the 20 be a very fluid, potent offense. And then when you get to that red zone, they sputter out. It's so weird. And that's, again, I think it has a lot to do with Kyle just overthinking things. Because, you still have Debo. You still have Brandon Ayuk. You still have George Kittle. Obviously, you still have Brock Purdy. So, what is it? And that's the thing is I see him dropping back on 3 of those downs every single time and throwing the ball. When last year, when the Niners were one of the best red zone offenses, they were running the ball. So it's almost like Kyle doesn't trust Jordan Mason in the red zone. And it's frustrating because, at the end of the game today, Jordan Mason fumbles the ball in the red zone. The one time that Kyle trusts him. So I can guarantee you he's probably not going to get the ball in the red zone anymore this season. Because Kyle has trust issues. I've said a lot about Kyle in this pod, and rather in this episode. And I'm really starting to think that a lot of the problems that the 49ers are seeing are coming back on Kyle Shanahan. I think that when it comes to starting a game off, running the ball, making a defense consider the run game, and then working it from that way out. I mean, it's kind of like he's trusting Brock more now, which is great. But what have you excelled in for the last 8 seasons with the 49ers? Well, it's been the run game, right? Because you haven't had a quarterback till now that you can actually rely on. So you got every game going with the run game, and you've been pretty dominant by doing so, at least in the past 5 years. There's a lot of losing in the first 3. So I think there's a problem with Kyle right now, and I'm not calling for him to be on a hot seat. I don't think that's anything like that. I think that it really just shows how much his playbook revolves around Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel, guys who can do just about everything. And when it comes to trusting a quarterback, well, he's finally starting to, and he's doing it at the wrong times. I understand throwing it on first down once in a while, but starting off a game, starting off certain drives where you've been predictable at that point, I'd rather you be predictable with the run game because that's what you're special in. So ultimately, I think that Kyle needs to figure out what he wants to do with this team. Do you want to beat them with trick plays? Do you want to beat them with what you've been beating teams with the last 5 years? Because right now, some of both, a little bit here and a little bit there, it's not working. You're 2-3. And you have really good players up and down that team. As far as game balls are concerned in this one, I'm not going to hand any out. Because this was a bad loss. This is the worst loss of the season, believe it or not. And that's considering that Rams game. But the Rams game, you had a lot of guys out, right? And yeah, Brock still had a great game that game. Juwan Jennings carried. Jordan Mason had a good game. Came down to just poor execution in the last minute, right? Well, this is the second week in a 5-week season that you've had a breakdown of just complete mental breakdown with Jordan Mason fumble, with just multiple opportunities missed. We talk about the takeaways that the defense had. I mean, they had the blocked field goal, right? Ran it in. That was great. Nick Bosa with the awesome interception and running that ball back and putting us in a great position where you could have just taken a shot on first down and had a shot at the end zone, right? Well, that sputtered out into taking a field goal. So it felt like the 49ers in the first half could have probably put up 35 points if the play calls were there, if the execution was there. There's just a number of factors in this game that boiled down to ultimately, I think, the worst loss of the season. Now, There's one positive, I guess. The Packers are about to beat the Rams. The Giants beat the Seahawks. The Seahawks are frauds. The 49ers are looking like it too. But you're right there with the Seahawks. You see them in a week. If you can get a win, then you're tied for first again. So you're not far away from leading your division, and you've had a terrible season to start. In terms of being right there in the mix, you're right there because there's still a lot of good teams losing. But in terms of taking advantage of the good teams losing, you haven't done it one bit. So frustrating season to start. We're in week 5. Obviously, the Eagles are on their bye this week. The Chargers are on their bye. So this is going to be the only post game of the week. But yeah, it's a frustrating one for sure. I really thought the 49ers had this thing locked up. I think Kyle has a streak, or had a streak going, of 38-0 in the fourth quarter when leading by 10 points. Well, that's over. Mr. Complacent. You lost this game again. So, look, a lot had to happen. Brock didn't play a great game. The 2 interceptions he had, I don't really pin on him because they were just good plays defensively. The first one was a tip pass. It was a tip. I can't call it a tip drill. It was just a tip pass off the defensive line, and Budda Baker came in and made an interception. It's a good play. The second interception, you left a guy who you knew was blitzing completely uncovered. And I guess you could put it on Brock for, instead of just dumping the ball off to George Kittle, who was open on a quick out route, he tried to throw it downfield to, I think it was Brandon Ayuk. So, sure, let's say that Brock just had a terrible game through those 2 interceptions and cost us the game. Well, I can't actually say that because there was so much other stuff that happened. Not having a kicker, fumbling the ball in the red zone as Jordan Mason, defensive breakdowns late stages in the game, missed tackles on James Conner. Look, James Conner's a good running back. He's hard to bring down, sure. But as a 49er defense that prides themselves in stopping a run game for many years in a row and just being the more physical team, you let this guy run all over you. And that was pathetic. That was a pathetic showing from the 49ers run defense. So I'm going to wrap this one up. Bad loss, right? But once again, still in the mix. But we got to figure something out quick. Because this team right now does not look good. And I think a lot of what we saw last year was great execution on every asset of the game, from first quarter to through the fourth, right? And one thing I saw last year, that second half 49ers team last year was unstoppable. The adjustments they made at halftime were incredible. It took a lot to come out and smack the 49ers in the face in the second half last year. This year, completely different story. Flip the script. It's the other way around. The execution in the second half through the first 5 weeks of the season have been awful. Subpar is an understatement. So, this has been week 5 post game. It was a little bit shorter, right? But look, we're going to hopefully the 49ers lick their wounds. They look at themselves in the mirror. They can figure out some of the issues. And hopefully there's no more injuries that happened to some key guys. I'm hoping that Jake Moody's back soon because, I expect now for the 49ers to probably sign some kicker. I don't know who's out there. I haven't looked at that yet. But I expect Jake to be out a few weeks because it was a terrible tackle attempt and completely rolled up on his ankle. But, your kicker shouldn't be the one making the tackle. And that's the ultimate problem with that play. This has been the week 5 post game for the 49ers. This is the Behind the Back podcast. I've been Benny the Jet. Marcos and I will break this game down on Thursday. It'll be nice for me to kind of vent I'm going to try and chill the rest of the night, enjoy the rest of the weekend. All of our links are below in the description. We appreciate y'all. Love y'all. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.